There you go. That was a little bit more sudden than I was expecting, but there you go. If you could change the world, what would you change? Perhaps you would change something about the things that divide us, the things that keep people apart, the things where we segregate one another, race, or those things that just actually make it difficult for us to listen to one another and to connect with one another. Or perhaps you would change the injustice you see every time you turn on the TV or scroll through your social media feed, the way that people are just treated wrongly and unfairly, and it causes you to think to yourself, surely this isn't how we're supposed to live. Surely the world isn't supposed to be like that. Or perhaps you would change the way that we communicate with one another. Things like WhatsApp group messages. Who likes a WhatsApp group message? That causes me to think, do we all really need to know that your son can't make training this evening? I have a pet hate against WhatsApp group messages. But I wonder what it is for you. What are the things that if you could, you would change things in the world? I'm sure there's things, big things or small irritating things. Wouldn't it be great if we could just push a button and those things that need changing are automatically changed? The problem is, the problem of the world are not solved just by pushing a button, are they? It takes a lot more hard work. It takes a lot more effort than just simply saying, I want this to change and I'm going to push a button and that's going to change. I'm in awe of the people who have changed the world, who've shaped the culture, who have made things better and made things different. I'm in awe of the people who looked at the world and thought, this could be better, this should be better, and have done something about it, and now things have shifted and things have changed. But if I'm honest, I think, I could never be like that. I could never do that. I can't change the world at all. I can't even change the time on the oven, the clock there. How on earth can I change the world? Where would I even start? Maybe you feel like that. Sometimes you look at the problems and think, I wish I could just push this button and that would change. But you feel powerless. What can I do? What have I got to offer? Where do I even begin to change the things in our world that needs changing? If you're a Jesus follower, perhaps you've heard somebody say to you, probably me, that you should be more like Jesus. And that's a good thing to do, isn't it? Wouldn't it be amazing if we were all like Jesus? People who don't believe that Jesus is who he claims to be, still acknowledge the goodness in him, still see the positive impact that he's had on the world, how Jesus has shaped the way that we live, and he shapes our culture now 2,000 years on, 2,000 miles away from where he lived and the things that he did. But again, if I'm honest, this feels like an impossible goal. How on earth am I able, or how on earth am I supposed to be like Jesus? Jesus is absolutely perfect. He's the only person who lived a perfect life. How can I be like that? I can't be perfect. I can't even stack the dishwasher perfectly. I always put the things in the wrong place, according to my wife at least. Maybe you share that thing. How on earth can we be like this? And we're sort of met with these messages about, look, these are the things in the world. Go and change your world, or if you're a Jesus follower, go and be like Jesus. And I think, if I'm honest, sometimes it feels like an impossible target to attain to. It feels like an impossible level to reach. So I'm trying something new. I'm trying to, lower the bar to something that's a little bit more achievable, something that I think actually is a bit more sustainable, something that I think I can do. I'm trying out a new mantra. Instead of being more like Jesus, I'm going to be more pirate. And there's Tim, our associate pastor. On a Tuesday, Tim likes to dress up as a pirate. And I love AI. Isn't it great what you can do with these things? Now, before you think I've lost the plot, I'm not talking about, getting a parrot and a wooden leg. I'm not talking about swapping my car for a big boat. I'm not talking about swapping out my morning coffee for some rum. I'm talking about something that a guy called Sam Conniff Allende describes in his amazing book, Be More Pirate. And, highly recommend this. It's lots of fun and lots of interesting stuff in it. And it might surprise you to learn that pirates actually changed the world in good ways. Now, sure, pirates did, they stole things, and they raided and they pillaged and they killed people. But apart from that, they were pretty decent folk. Let me just be honest and serious for a time. That Hollywood caricature of the chaos and all of the sort of the violence that we see in films and that stuff, that's often exaggerated, that pirates wouldn't all of them like that. Now, of course, there were some that were bloodthirsty and violent, and actually we shouldn't be celebrating them at all. But lots of pirates were just simply people who were trying to survive in a very oppressive and a very corrupt system, and they were just trying to make life better for them. They're trying to push back against the unfair hierarchies, the harsh treatment, just the systemic injustice that was there in the world, and certainly in that culture and British culture as part of that as well. And so pirates were a group of people that saw something in the way that the world was happening, in the way that they were treated, and they thought, something could change here. Something should change here. So they had the courage to challenge what was broken. They had the courage to stand up for things. And as a result, they actually changed the world in a good way. So Sam talks about a bunch of these stuff in his book. Let me give you some examples. So pirates practiced democracy. On their boats, they actually acted in a way that's very similar to our modern day democratic systems. Every crew member had a voice. Every crew member had a say. Captains were elected, and actually they could be removed from office or removed from post if they abused their position or if they abused their power. They could get voted out. And each boat had their own set of rules, which are called the pirate articles. And these were all agreed by the crew, and they would lay out, this is how people would be paid, this is how we dealt with punishment or discipline, this is how people will be treated. And this was a democratic process, that people knew what was expected of them, and they had a say in that. This was so radical in the midst of this world where actually sailors had no rights or no say. And actually, often sailors weren't even employed. They were sort of press ganged into working on ships. Sometimes they were sort of just kidnapped and taken on board on the British Navy and didn't even get paid, let alone have a voice or have a right. So pirates sort of brought something in that was different about culture and how to do things. But they also invented workers' rights. Our understanding of workplace compensation actually comes from pirates. So if you got injured, you weren't thrown overboard, you were paid. You were compensated for it. And they had a set system set out in their pirate articles that would say, if you lost a leg or an eye, because that seems to be a common thing as a pirate, or a hand or whatever it is, there's this set amount that you would be compensated for because of it. And actually, often it was enough for you to be able to retire because if you couldn't work again. That is something that actually we continue today because of what the pirates did. And through that, they described how they would share out the stuff that they stole. Yeah, okay, they did do that. So that's not maybe a great thing. But everybody would know what share they would get. It would be laid out. It was transparent. And yet the captains and leaders got more than the normal crew, but the gap wasn't massive and it was laid out. Everybody knew what they were getting and what everybody else was getting. So they invented this concept of workers' rights. And they also built diverse communities. Pirate ships were some of the most diverse communities around at that time. People of different races and genders and nationalities gathered together to work together side by side. They lived as equals. And they sort of recognized that. And it didn't matter the color of your skin. It didn't matter what gender you were. All that mattered was your loyalty to one another and your loyalty to the crew. So again, in a world and a culture that wasn't diverse, that actually said, if you don't look like this, or if you're not of this gender, or if you're not in this social class, then you're not important or you're not as valuable. Pirates pushed back against that, and they created equality and diversity, something that we celebrate and we're still working towards today. And of course, they weren't saints, but they had the courage to challenge systems that were broken. They had the courage to stand up and say, that's wrong, that shouldn't be how things are. And instead, they wanted to model something different, something something fairer. And as a result, their culture changed and the culture of the world around them changed. Pirates did not set out to change the world. They weren't there because they thought, we want to have this altruistic view and bless all these other people. No, that wasn't what they were doing. They didn't set out to change the world. They just wanted to change their world. But by doing so, in some places, the result is they did change the world. And, in this book, Sam talks about the concept of good rebellion, or sometimes he talks about making good trouble. And this is all about having the courage to stop asking for permission to do what you already know is right. It's about the thinking, what are those things that need changing? Where are those systems that are corrupt? And actually, I know what I should be doing in this place. Good rebellion, making good trouble, is about having that courage to stand up, to speak out and to push back against that corruption and that injustice and that unfairness that we see around us. And that's exactly what pirates did. And without recognizing it or without realizing, pirates actually lived in some places in a way that actually isn't a million miles away from how Jesus lived. Jesus, of course, he wasn't a pirate, but he was a rule breaker of a different kind. Jesus stood up and pushed back against the rules that kept people small, that excluded people or made them seem sort of forgotten. Jesus stood up and pushed back against the systems. He challenged the systems that valued reputation over compassion. And Jesus refused to let the religious traditions get in the way of human flourishing. And there's a great story, there's a great example where we see this at play. Luke recalls this for us in one of the Gospels. At the beginning of the New Testament, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and these are all biographical accounts of the life of Jesus, the things that Jesus said and the things that Jesus did. And Luke tells us this. He says, on a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues. So it sets the scene for what's about to happen. See, it's the holiest day of the week. The Sabbath is this holy day. It's really important to their Jewish culture. And the synagogue is a holy place. It's the holiest day, and Jesus is in a holy place. And there are tons of rules for what you could do on this day, but also for what you could do in this place. And actually, lots of these rules, certainly rules around the Sabbath, were created for good. They were created for the benefit of people to bless the community. But what happened over time is that certainly the religious leaders made these rules so restrictive that they'd become a burden and they weren't a blessing. So this is setting the scene for what's about to happen. And Luke tells us that a woman was there who'd been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. And there's an interesting line, she was crippled by a spirit. In that time, people sort of viewed physical pain and sickness both through a physical lens, but also through a spiritual lens. And Luke, who's actually a doctor, is basically saying that there's something deeper going on here. There's something that is holding her back. There's something that is holding her down. And however you explain it, the result is the same. For 18 years, she'd been bent over. For 18 years, she's suffered. For 18 years, she's struggled to look people in the eye. She's had 18 years of pain, 18 years of being overlooked, of being pushed to the margins, 18 years of probably being rejected or even excluded from worship because people would have seen that challenge with her or that disability that she had and actually would have thought, well, maybe this is because of something bad that you've done, and that's part of their culture and their system. And this is what's going on. How is Jesus going to respond to this woman? And I love this. When Jesus saw her, I just love that phrase, when he saw her. This woman probably had gone to that synagogue every week. She's part of that community. People would have seen her all the time. But everybody would have looked past her. Everybody had seen her, but nobody really saw her. They just ignored her. She's part of the background. And for years she'd come and she probably would be ignored. And she was the kind of person that you just get used to ignoring. But Jesus doesn't. He sees her. He doesn't look past her. He sees her pain. He sees her story and he sees her worth. And Luke goes on with the story and he says, he called her forward. This is a dangerous thing to do. This is a bold move to make. Women don't usually get called forward word in the synagogue. They don't get called to the front. Again, that part of their culture is that they didn't have a voice in that culture. And certainly if you had a disability as well, you're like right down the bottom of the pile. But Jesus sees her and he calls her to the front. And he's already starting to rewrite the rules of this synagogue. He's already starting to rewrite the culture of how things were done there. And he's saying to this woman, look, you belong here. You are important. You are precious. You are valuable. You matter. Come and stand where everybody else stands. And then he said to her, woman, you are set free from your infirmity. Then he put his hands on her and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Isn't it amazing what's happening? He sees her, he recognizes her, he values her, and then he sets her free. He doesn't just heal her physically, he restores her dignity. This woman would have been defined by this condition, but now she's described and in some way defined by the compassion that Jesus has. And he puts his hands on her. That sounds a bit off, doesn't it, in our culture as we read that. I mean, again, this is adding value to this woman. People would have been shocked. I'd imagine there might have been an audible gasp as Jesus reached out and touched her. Because again, they might think because of her disability that she's unclean, part of their Jewish rules and Jewish traditions. And in Jesus touching her, he's taking that uncleanliness, if that's a word, onto himself. And he's actually contaminating himself. You just don't do that. So again, this poor woman for 18 years has lived like this. People just ignore her and stay away from her. They don't want to be associated with her. But Jesus sees her and he speaks to her and he reaches out a hand and he physically just places his hand upon her, something that has probably not happened to her for 18 years. And look at the result. Immediately she straightened up and she praises God. The immediate response, the atmosphere in that place shifts. Things starts to change. It's amazing. Now, how are the religious leaders going to respond to this situation? Surely they're celebrating and praising God along with the rest of the crowd. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, there are 6 days for work, so come to be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath. Isn't it amazing that the way that they respond isn't with joy or gratitude, it's with indignation. And the thing that is interesting is they have a go at the woman, but without having a go at the woman. So they're not. Jesus was the one who did it. Jesus saw, and he spoke to her, and he touched her, and he healed her. They don't condemn Jesus. They don't tell Jesus off because they're too cowardly, I suppose, to do that. They sort of issue this edict to everybody else and try to make this woman feel smaller. And I can picture like this synagogue leader standing there, like red in the face, maybe like steam coming out of his ears, sort of shouting, "This isn't the way we do things around here." And he's right. This isn't the way that they do things around here because they'd allowed their culture to shift from something that was designed to be of benefit, something that was designed to be a blessing to people, actually became restricting to people. It wasn't, this culture about the Sabbath was there to protect people, but now it's about policing people's behavior. And what Jesus is doing is that he's restoring God's heart for the Sabbath. He's actually restoring the whole point of why he gave this special day where people can rest and relax and spend time in worship. This day that was a gift. It's a day of freedom. It's a day to experience God's goodness. And Jesus is seeing that it's become something else. And he's got the courage to stand up and to push back and try to reshape the culture. And the Lord answered him, Jesus answered him, "You hypocrites, don't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or your donkey from the stall and lead out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" His response is powerful. He calls out their hypocrisy. And he even gives her a new title, a daughter of Abraham. This is a title of honor. It's a title of belonging. It's elevating her importance. And he's sort of bringing her back. He restores her place in the family of faith. And what we see is Jesus is shaping the culture of that synagogue right there in real time. And when he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with the wonderful things that he was doing. And I love the way that this sort of story unfolds. The people who were clinging to power and control are left speechless, whereas the crowd, the ordinary people, are filled with joy. They're delighted. I love that word. It's about more than happiness. It's about that thing that they're seeing something amazing has happened. Jesus is challenging what is broken. He's restoring what has been lost. And he's creating a space, he's creating an environment for people to flourish. And the thing that amazes me about this is it took one moment of courage. One moment for somebody to stand up and to speak out. Yeah, and of course it's Jesus, and to be more like Jesus can be a challenging thing to do. But when he did that, the culture starts to shift. Things start to change. Just imagine what it would have been like to be in that room as you saw that happening. Hope would start to rise up in the midst of that community. Jesus made the world a better place. And actually, he's made our world a better place through examples like this that carries on. So let me ask you this question. How can we be more like Jesus or more pirate and mold the culture around us in a positive way? Let me pose this question in a slightly different way. How can we change our world? I'm inspired and I'm in awe of how Jesus changed the world. I'm encouraged by the examples of the pirates, and how they changed the world, because that makes me see that maybe this is possible for everyday folks like us. If everyday people can shift the culture, then maybe we can do that as well. I'm inspired and I'm encouraged and I'm in awe by the things that Jesus has done and how he's changed the world. But again, if I'm honest, I think I can't do that because I can't live up to that standard. But I can be more pirate. And if pirates can do it, then maybe I can do it as well. Maybe we can do it. So how do we do this? How do we change our world? Well, firstly, we start small. Culture always starts small. So start with one thing that needs to change. Think about it. Think about your workplace or your family or your school or your team or wherever it is. And think about, what is one thing that as you look at that, you think, that should be different. That could be different. What is one thing that makes it difficult for people to flourish in that environment? Maybe it's negativity. Maybe it's gossip. Maybe it's exclusion, maybe it's apathy, maybe it's fear, maybe it's something else. Just think about it, identify it, name it, and pray about it. And then model the opposite. Don't wait for permission, don't wait for position. Just start to live differently. Replace gossip with encouragement. Replace cynicism with hope. Replace those places where people just moan and complain with gratitude. And when you start to model the opposite, you don't need to fix everything. You just need to go first. You just need to see what is one thing that needs to change, what's broken, what could be different, what should be different, and then start to live differently, model a different way of being, a different way of living, a different way of interacting or reacting. And then when you do that, find your crew. Pirates never sailed alone, and neither did Jesus. The thing is, change happens in the context of community. So find one or two people who share your heart to make a difference and commit to encouraging one another in it. Commit to supporting one another. Find your crew who are going to journey with you and stand up against that injustice or that pain or that suffering, and actually find those people who see what you see and who are willing to model something different and support one another and journey with one another and stay connected to God. You see, Jesus shaped culture by walking closely with his Father. And we do the same. We allow God to inspire us. And when God inspires us, he prods us and he nudges us and he helps us see, actually, that could be different. That should be different. Jesus didn't shape the culture with violence. He shaped the culture by allowing himself to be in step with his heavenly Father, by allowing the Spirit of God that was at work within him to guide him and lead him and prompt him and equip him and fill him to do the things that he needed to do to shift the culture around him. The same Spirit that was at work within Jesus has been given to us if you're a follower of Jesus. Let me say that again. I just want you to allow this to sink in. The same Spirit that was at work in Jesus, that enabled Jesus to do the things that he did, has been given to you if you're a follower of Jesus, to equip you and enable you to do the things that he calls you to do. And now I think, how can I be more like Jesus? Well, in myself, I cannot be more like Jesus, but he has given me his Spirit to be at work within me, to shape me and to mold me and to challenge me and to change me so I can do the same for the culture and the world around me. And I want to give you a real life example of how this has been lived out, of how somebody has changed the culture by doing exactly these things. We're going to get the band up on stage as we sort of wrap up this time. And I want to talk about Katherine Johnson. Who's heard of Katherine Johnson? If you've seen the film Hidden Figures, it's all about Katherine Johnson. She was one of the first black female mathematicians to work at NASA in the 50s and the 60s. And the film Hidden Figures is a great film that sort of tells her story. And she worked in an environment that was dominated by men, an environment that was defined by racial segregation and by sexism. But instead of being crushed by that culture, she quietly molded it into something better. And she did those things that we just talked about. So Katherine started small. She didn't arrive at NASA with a platform or a position or a film about her. She just had a desk and a pencil and a determination to do good work. She worked with excellence and with integrity. And her faith showed her that the work she was doing wasn't for her bosses. It wasn't to impress people. It was for God. It was an act of devotion to them. And Katherine modeled the opposite. When others around her, when the people around her, when the culture around her excluded, she included. When the culture around her was dismissive, she was gracious. And when people responded to her with assumptions about her race or her gender, she didn't respond with bitterness. She responded with brilliance. She went above and beyond. And her quiet dignity challenged the injustice that was around her. It challenged it far more powerfully than anger ever could. And Katherine also found her crew. She built friendships with others who shared her values, people who saw the culture and thought things could be different, things should be different. There were people who believed the things that she believed, and they encouraged one another and they supported one another. And through doing this, Katherine's worked. She gave permission and courage to other people to stand up. She gave permission and courage to other people to speak up, to try harder, to believe that things could change. And she stayed connected to God. She was a woman of deep faith. And she once said that her work was simply using the talent that God had gave me. So through her prayerful humility, through her dependence on God, she shaped the culture around her, and it shaped and impacted what she did. She didn't set out to change the world. She just set out to change her world, and in so doing, she changed the culture for the people who came after her. See, this is what it's really about, changing the world. You don't have to change the world. You just have to change your world. And when we do this, when we start small, when we model a better way, when we find our crew, when we stay connected to God, the atmosphere around us begins to shift. When we stand up against injustice, when we model a different way, hope begins to rise. The love of Jesus flows through ordinary people in ordinary places, workplaces, homes, schools, friendship groups, families, those places begin to breathe again. And the result, you change the world. It might be just for one person or two people, or it might be bigger, but that's not the point. That's not our job. We're just called to change our world and leave the rest up to God. We're called to make good trouble, to have a positive impact on our culture and our society and our world, and leave the rest up to God. So this week, let me encourage you, let me challenge you to choose courage over comfort. Choose compassion over convenience. Choose faith over fear. And when you do so, you help others see what God's world is meant to be like, what his kingdom is meant to look like and be like and feel like. So go and change your world this week. One act of courage, one step of love, one decision of faith at a time.